What if I told you that one condescending laugh from a powerful senator could destroy 24 years of political influence in less than 3 minutes? What if I told you that one condescending laugh from a powerful senator could destroy 24 years of political influence in less than 3 minutes? What if that senator thought mocking a young conservative activist would score easy political points, but instead triggered the most devastating public humiliation in Senate history? And what if the response didn't just go viral, but ended a career that had survived multiple scandals, corruption investigations, and political storms? This is how Charlie Kirk turned one senator's arrogance into a career-ending mistake that changed everything. The Senate Finance Committee hearing room was packed with reporters, lobbyists, and political insiders. Senator Margaret Daniels, 67, the powerful Democrat from California, sat confidently at the committee table. With 24 years in the Senate, she was untouchable. Committee chairwoman, progressive icon, political kingmaker, she had destroyed Republicans, silenced conservatives, and built an empire of influence that stretched from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Charlie Kirk, 30, had been invited to testify about youth political engagement, but everyone knew this was a setup. Senator Daniels had requested his appearance specifically, and her staff had been privately boasting about the takedown they had planned for the young conservative activist. As Kirk approached the witness table, Senator Daniels leaned back in her leather chair with a smirk that said it all. This would be easy, but what happened in the opening moments revealed her fatal mistake. "Mr. Kirk," Senator Daniels began, her voice dripping with condescension, "you claim to represent young Americans, but isn't it true that your organization is just a front for billionaire donors who want to brainwash college students into supporting policies that harm their own futures?" The room was silent. Cameras focused on Charlie Kirk's face, waiting for his reaction to the loaded question. "Senator Daniels, thank you for that question," Charlie Kirk replied calmly. "Before I answer, can you tell me which specific policies you're referring to?" Senator Daniels' smirk widened. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. "Oh, let's start with your opposition to student loan forgiveness. You're telling young people drowning in debt that they shouldn't get help from their own government." "I support helping students with debt," Charlie Kirk said. "I just think we should ask why college costs have increased 1,200% since the government started guaranteeing student loans. Don't you think that's worth discussing?" The first sign of trouble appeared on Daniel's face. The question was simple, direct, and completely derailed her prepared attack. She hadn't expected Kirk to pivot to policy details. She'd expected him to get defensive about billionaire donors. That's a talking point from right-wing think tanks," she stammered. "The real issue is that Republicans like you want to deny young people access to education." "Senator, I'm not a Republican," Charlie Kirk interrupted gently. "I'm not affiliated with any political party. I just ask questions that universities apparently don't want students to hear." Senator Daniels felt the interview slipping away. Her staff had prepared her for a different conversation entirely. She decided to go for the jugular. "Mr. Kirk, let's be honest about what you really are," she said, leaning forward with venom in her voice. "You're a privileged white male who travels to college campuses telling minority students that systemic racism doesn't exist. You profit off division and hate." Then came the moment that changed everything. Charlie Kirk paused for a long moment, studying Senator Daniels' face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried across the entire room. "Senator, you just called me a privileged white male who profits off hate. That's a serious accusation. Before we continue, I'd like to share something with this committee and everyone watching." He reached into his folder and pulled out a document. "This is a financial disclosure form. It shows that last year, my organization gave away $2.3 million in scholarships. 68% went to minority students. Would you like to know how much your Senate salary was last year?" Senator Daniels went pale. "That's not relevant to $174,000, Charlie Kirk continued. "Plus benefits, plus speaking fees, plus the stock trades that somehow always seem to outperform the market. Senator, you've made more money in politics than I've ever made in my entire career. So when you talk about privilege, maybe we should discuss who's really profiting here." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Senator Daniels was visibly shaking now. This wasn't going according to plan. Her staff was frantically taking notes, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. "You're deflecting from your harmful rhetoric," she said desperately. "You tell young people that America isn't racist, that police brutality is a myth, that—" "Senator, I've never said any of those things," Charlie Kirk replied calmly. "But since you brought up police brutality, can you explain why violent crime has increased 40% in cities with Democratic leadership while decreasing in Republican areas? If progressive policies work, shouldn't the data show that?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. Senator Daniels had built her career on emotional appeals and moral posturing. She wasn't prepared for someone who brought receipts. Statistics can be manipulated, she said weakly. These are FBI statistics, Charlie Kirk replied. Are you saying the FBI is manipulating data to help conservatives? But Daniels made one final fatal mistake. Realizing she was being destroyed on policy, Senator Daniels decided to go personal. She leaned back in her chair and let out a long, condescending laugh. Mr. Kirk, she said with maximum contempt, you're 30 years old. I've been fighting for civil rights since before you were born. I've passed legislation that's helped millions of Americans. What exactly have you accomplished besides creating viral TikToks? The laughter echoed through the committee room. Some of her Democratic colleagues joined in. The progressive gallery snickered. Senator Daniels looked around triumphantly, thinking she'd finally landed a killing blow. But Charlie Kirk didn't look hurt or embarrassed. He looked amused. Then came the response that ended everything. Senator Daniels, you asked what I've accomplished, Charlie Kirk said, his voice steady and clear. In the last 5 years, my organization has registered 1.2 million young voters. We've hosted educational events at over 3,000 schools. We've given away millions in scholarships. We've created a platform where young Americans can hear different perspectives and think for themselves. He paused, looking directly at her. Now let me ask you, what have you accomplished? You've been in the Senate for 24 years. In that time, student debt has tripled, youth unemployment has skyrocketed, drug overdoses among young people have reached record levels, college affordability has gotten worse, not better. Mental health crises are at an all-time high. The room was completely silent now. You laughed at my age, Senator, but maybe the real question is this. If experience is so valuable, why are all the problems you claim to care about getting worse under your leadership? The devastating truth continued to unfold. You mentioned civil rights. Let's talk about that. In your 24 years in the Senate, the wealth gap between white and black families has actually increased. Educational achievement gaps have widened. Economic mobility has decreased. If your policies work, why do these disparities keep getting worse? Senator Daniels tried to interrupt, but Charlie Kirk wasn't finished. You asked about my TikToks, Senator. Those videos have been viewed over 500 million times by young Americans who are hungry for honest conversations about their futures. Your last campaign video got 12,000 views. Maybe the question isn't whether I'm too young to understand politics. Maybe it's whether you're too old to understand the people you claim to represent. The final blow was surgical in its precision. Senator, you've spent this entire hearing attacking my character, questioning my motives, and mocking my age, but you haven't defended a single one of your policy positions. You haven't explained why your decades of experience have produced such poor results. You've just tried to destroy someone who asks inconvenient questions. Charlie Kirk stood up slightly, looking directly at Senator Daniels. The young Americans watching this hearing can see exactly what's happening here. They can see a powerful politician who's so threatened by basic questions that she resorts to personal attacks. They can see someone who's been in power for nearly a quarter century defending her failures by laughing at someone else's youth. He paused for effect. Senator, you didn't just mock me today. You mocked every young American who's struggling under policies you've supported for decades. You mocked everyone who believes that maybe, just maybe, the people who created these problems aren't the best people to solve them. The silence that followed was deafening. Senator Daniels sat frozen, her face white as paper. The condescending smirk was completely gone. Around the room, staff members were staring at their phones as social media exploded with clips of the exchange. The committee chairman tried to move on to other business, but nobody was paying attention. Every eye was on Senator Daniels, who looked like she was having trouble breathing. Charlie Kirk gathered his papers and stood up. Thank you for inviting me today, Senator. I hope this conversation helps young Americans understand the difference between asking questions and avoiding them. As he walked out of the hearing room, the silence continued. Senator Daniels never said another word. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within an hour, Daniels Destroyed was trending worldwide. The video of her condescending laugh, followed by Kirk's methodical response, hit 10 million views in the first day. Conservative accounts shared it endlessly, but even liberal commentators admitted it was a brutal takedown. The damage went beyond social media. Daniels' approval ratings, already shaky due to recent scandals, collapsed overnight. Her own Democratic colleagues began distancing themselves. Donors started pulling support. Editorial boards that had endorsed her for decades called for fresh leadership. The fatal blow came 3 days later when the Los Angeles Times, her hometown paper and longtime supporter, ran a devastating editorial titled "When Arrogance Meets Accountability." They called her performance an embarrassment to progressive values and suggested it was time for new leadership. Within 2 weeks, Senator Daniels announced she would not seek re-election, citing health concerns that everyone knew were really poll numbers. Her 24-year career in the Senate, which had seemed invulnerable just days earlier, was over. The lesson resonated far beyond politics. Senator Daniels had made the classic mistake of powerful people everywhere. She assumed that mocking someone younger meant she was wiser, that attacking character meant she was stronger, that laughing at questions meant she didn't have to answer them. But Charlie Kirk had done something she wasn't prepared for. Instead of getting angry or defensive, he'd simply asked her to defend her record. Instead of matching her attacks with his own, he'd let the facts speak for themselves. Instead of playing her game, he'd changed the rules entirely. That day in the Senate hearing room proved something that politicians across the spectrum need to remember. Experience without results is just failure with tenure. Power without accountability is just corruption with credentials. And sometimes the most devastating response to mockery isn't anger. It's asking someone to explain why they deserve to be taken seriously. Because when someone laughs at you instead of answering your questions, they're not showing confidence, they're showing fear. Fear that their policies don't work, their leadership has failed, and their time in power is coming to an end. Senator Daniels learned that lesson too late. But for everyone watching, it was a masterclass in how truth, delivered calmly and backed by evidence, can defeat even the most entrenched political power. If this story reminds you why accountability matters more than seniority, why results matter more than rhetoric, then subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember that asking tough questions isn't disrespectful, it's democracy. What did you think of how Charlie Kirk handled being mocked by a sitting senator? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and remember, the people who laugh at your questions usually can't answer them.